Hello everybody, welcome back to Fanblade. Slight change of pace today. It is still blisteringly cold outside. It's been raining all day, so there is no woodwork happening today. I've got guitars I want to build. I've got guitars I want to show you how to build them. It can't happen today. However, um, I'm spending the day in the studio. I've got the piano fully tuned. I've got the drum kit. It's fully good, sounding great. All the mics and everything are plugged in and working beautifully. So this coincides with a thing that I do every year. There's a challenge online called the RPM Challenge. It's for musicians to write and record an album in February. Now, as most of my friends and family are well aware, I do it every year. I did it this year. That's why there were no videos in February, is because I was busy in here making music with some of the instruments. That's the whole point of having instruments and building them, is so you can write songs and play them and record them and have fun. But with everybody on lockdown because of the virus, the people who run the RPM Challenge have decided to do the April Challenge. Yep, I'm making another album. So I'm stuck in here. I may as well use some of the tools I've got. I've got everything set up and ready to go, so that's happening. I'm not sure if I'm going to video any of that process or not, because it's not actually all that exciting watching me do 35 takes of the same guitar lick, sort of trying to get it right, you know. But on days when it's good weather and I've got nothing but time anyway, I will be in the garage and I will be building guitars and basses and other things. There's all sorts of stuff to do. So that's what's happening with the channel. Today, however, I have a treat for you. I have got a record that no one has ever heard. I say ever. Not for a good few decades, at least. I picked this up at a garage sale some months ago. This is an acetate disc. For those of you who don't know what an acetate disc is, it's a record, it's a very, very thin sheet of aluminium, and it's got cellulose acetate on the top of it, and that is cut in on a recording lathe, and it's a one-shot deal. These were not made for pressing. This, Robin's Recordings, were a recording studio in Christchurch back in the 50s, and possibly the 60s as well. It's very difficult to find out information about them, but and the address is there, but they're not there anymore, so don't go knocking on those people's doors. Now the trouble with cellulose acetate is that it gets this white stuff on it. It degrades over time, and I genuinely have not played this record yet. It's unlabeled. I have no idea what's on it, and we can find out together. But what you've got to remember is that with all of this degradation, parts of it might not sound that great, and we do run the risk that once the needle hits these spots, it might rip the acetate off the aluminium, and then we can never play this record again. So we've got a one-shot chance of getting the recording off this disc and into the computer. So, yeah, let's see what's on it.
And since our visitor, Mr. William Breed, is going to talk to us about the Grand Canyon, we've chosen a musical bridge from the Grand Canyon Suite, so that you can imagine yourself going down, down, down on muleback, right down to the Colorado River. Mr. William Breed is a Fulbright scholar from America, and he's been studying geology here at our university for the last year. A very interesting subject, Mr. Breed, and one that takes you out of doors in a very pleasant way.
Well, yes, that's one reason I went into geology, so I could spend part of my life at least in the outdoors.
And have you been out in our country too?
Well, I've been traveling around all through your country, but I've also been doing field work in Castle Hill Basin, which is between Porter's Pass and Arthur's Pass. I've been doing a study of the river terraces in that vicinity.
Have you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I imagine that you come from a very interesting state yourself. Possibly the geological formations there had something to do with deciding on the decision for your career. It's a very wide subject, though. Have you specialized in any particular branch?
Well, I'm actually in the field of geomorphology, which is the study of the Earth's surface and the changes that it has undergone throughout time by the processes of erosion, weathering, and glaciation, etc.
Well, there's plenty to interest you here in New Zealand.
Oh,
isn't
yes, there is.
there? Yes, plenty of erosion and weathering and so on.
A little bit too much in some parts.
You're quite right. Now, over in your state, too, there's a lot to interest you. I'd like you to tell us a little about Arizona.
Well, Arizona is a state that is, well, the area of it is approximately the same area as New Zealand, but it only has half the population. And the reason it only has half the population, you see, Molly, is that it's very dry. In the southern part, we only get from 9 to 12 inches of rain a year.
How do you manage on such a low rainfall?
Well, the farmers have to rely on pumping the water out of the ground and irrigating their land. And this way they can grow crops of cotton and citrus fruits, lettuce. The whole United States supply of lettuce in the winter comes from Yuma, Arizona. They ice it and ship it.
Do they?
Mm-hmm.
Underground, then, is
Oh,
that?
yes, plenty, because the mountains act sort of as a trap for the water. The mountains in Tucson is an elevation of 2,000 feet, but we have a mountain right nearby, the Santa Catalina Mountains, which rise up to 10,000 feet. And whenever you get mountains, they act as sort of a catchment for rainfall.
I see. Well, that's a very fortunate thing. Now, Arizona is down in the southwest, and it's one of the borders is formed by the Colorado River. Did you tell me?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And it's the Colorado River that has formed the Grand Canyon.
You're right. You're getting sharp on geography there, Molly. It might interest your listeners to know that the Grand Canyon was formed maybe 2 or 3 million years ago, and about that time it was just a level plain. And for some reason or other, this level plain started to slowly rise, and the Grand Canyon cut down into it, much like a knife would cut into a layer cake, exposing all these layers until actually now the river has cut down 5,000 or 6,000 feet into these sediments. And to the geologists, it is a wonderful story of the Earth's history from practically creation up to the present time.
And there it is all sliced so that you can get a wonderful view of the various layers.
Oh, yes, and the tourists get a wonderful trip down into the bottom on muleback.
I'm told that it may be wonderful, but it's a bit hair-raising, isn't it?
Well, they tell me, I've talked to several people, I myself have walked through the canyon. I've talked to the people that went down on muleback, and from straddling the big, heavy, well-fed mules, they get so aching in the legs that they swear if they ever go down to the bottom of the canyon again, they'll go down by foot. Now, I, who have gone down by foot, say that if I ever go down to the bottom of the canyon again, I'm going down by mule.
Or coming up by mule.
That's right.
But I've also heard of people who shut their eyes firmly at the top and opened them at the bottom.
I don't think they would see very much, except maybe the canyon from the top and the Colorado River at the bottom. Incidentally, there's a well-known joke that goes around about the river at the bottom. The Colorado is actually a very large river, and it has to be very, very strong to do all this eroding. But it carries something like, I think 1 million tons of soil through the canyon per day or per year almost. And so it's a muddy brown color. And the standing joke about that is that the river is too thick to drink and too thin to plow.
Yes, I didn't realize that. People don't talk about the river very much. But it was very hard country for a river to cause such erosion, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
I mean, it's mostly rock, isn't it?
Oh, pure rock.
Pure rock. Yes, well, I know a little about the Grand Canyon, and I think most of us do, because we've seen very colourful photographs of it. And colour is a word that's very overworked, Mr. Breed says, in Arizona.
There is a lot of color around. Many of the rocks are red and white and some shades of purple. And the colors you get are almost fantastic, especially when you have the sun shining on them from a low angle. You've all seen mountains with the last rays of the sun shining, how pink it gets. Now you can imagine the reflection you'd get from a red rock with the pink last rays of the sun shining on it. It almost looks unbelievable, you see.
I'm sure it does. It does look unbelievable in of course, because the climate is so dry.
Yes, that's right. Here in New Zealand, for instance, it's a very beautiful country, but it's beautiful because of the greenness of it. But where you don't have so much rain, you don't get the lush vegetation, so the bare rock shows through, and you can get the colors of the different sands and the different soils that have eroded from the rock. The main vegetation in southern Arizona is the cactus, which you've probably heard about. The one particular cactus is the saguaro cactus, which is the large forked cactus that you see, which is sort of a symbol of the Old West, along with the cowboy.
Yes, and it's the one you see, that little Mexican man sitting under with a big hat on.
Oh, yes, having a siesta.
That's right. Yes, now, generally speaking, Colorado is a cattle country, would that be right?
You mean Arizona?
I mean Arizona.
Yes. They have large ranches scattered throughout the whole country, and that is what the main where they get the main money. There's the timber industry in northern Arizona. They have one of the largest stands of virgin ponderosa pine in the United States, which is something you don't expect because Arizona, everyone thinks it's all desert. But northern Arizona, where you get up over an elevation of 7,000 feet, you do get these tremendous forests.
And what do they use the pines for?
Oh, it's just the same as your yellow pine for paper pulp and for building, lumbering industries.
I see. And apart from that, you have your lettuces and so on, and then you have your tourists.
Oh, yes, the tourists. New Zealand might start trying to attract more tourists. It's a very profitable industry.
I'm quite sure it is. And are there great hotels where they stay somewhere near the canyon, or what?
Oh, yes, they have large hotels on both the south rim and the north rim of the Grand Canyon. And when you walk down or go down by mule to the bottom of the canyon, they have a small ranch there called Phantom Ranch that you can see 100 feet higher than the south rim. And the south rim is where the main tourists come because it's more accessible. But the north rim to me is it's more beautiful because it has strands of aspen and large meadows with deer grazing in them. Deer are quite a problem in northern Arizona because at one time when they were using this part up there for grazing, the cowboys went through and shot off all the mountain lions. And the minute they shot off all the mountain lions, the deer started multiplying and they started eating all the aspen and all the vegetation, and finally grew to the point where they're almost on starvation. So now they have to have people come in and shoot the deer to keep them down, whereas if they would have left the mountain lions alone in the first place, they would have been all right.
Tell me a little about a mountain lion. Is it a real lion?
Oh, it's a member of the cat family. It isn't as large as the African lion, but it's maybe 4 or 5 feet long.
And quite a nasty fellow, is he?
Yeah, well, you usually don't run into him, so you don't have much to worry about.
You don't? No, well, I don't think I would particularly want to run into him. And over there, the climate must be quite different from New Zealand.
Well, it's quite different from New Zealand in the winter. They say that Arizona has 10 months of summer and 2 months of no winter, but that's only in the southern part. The northern part is usually at an elevation over 6,000 or 7,000 feet, so it gets very cold in the winter, and you do get snow.
Yes.
And in fact, in Flagstaff, which is about 7,000 feet and situated right at the base of some volcanic peaks, it gets below zero during the winter.
Now, could you tell us something of... Could you, Bill?
Well, maybe I should start by first telling you a little about the Hopi Indians. They live on mesas in the central part of northeastern Arizona. They live on a series of cliff sort of houses situated on tops of the cliffs.
Yes, yes.
These Indians have a very complicated religious cycle. They have all these dances. Most of the dances they have are all oriented toward getting more rainfall, so their crops will be a success.
Which is a very important thing.
I've one particular dance that I remember going to, which is very spectacular. It's called the Hopi Snake Dance, and in this they catch live rattlesnakes and keep them in their kivas for say a week or so before the dance. Then when they bring them out to the dance, one of the Hopis will dance with the rattlesnake in his mouth, and another one will keep the rattlesnake's attention with a feather. And they'll dance with this rattlesnake for, say, an hour or so. And then all of a sudden, at a certain point in the ceremony, they leave the rattlesnakes loose. And of course, the spectators scatter because they don't want to get bitten.
They're dead.
The snake is poisonous, and for some reason or other, the Hopis have found out a way, even though the snake bites them, and it isn't fatal. They have some sort of a medicine which they won't tell the white man what it is.
Oh, yes, yes. And how about the Navajos? How do they live, and what do they live in?
Well, the Navajos are nomadic, whereas the Hopis are sedentary and grow corn for a living. The Navajos wander all over northeastern Arizona, keeping flocks of sheep, and they take the wool from the sheep, and the woman cards it and spins it and dyes it with the native vegetable dyes which they get on the desert, then weaves it into what is called the Navajo rug. They're usually in geometric patterns and very, very beautiful creations.
Now, tell me, do they, I noticed that some of the rugs are more or less in reverse. They go so far, and then they start out the same pattern again.
Yes, they're usually a mirror image of one another, and the Navajo woman usually weaves up or rolls up the bottom of the rug and continues with the pattern up to the top, and it comes out exactly identical without her even seeing the other half. They have a wonderful memory of pattern in their minds. Even the Hopi, or most of the Indians you find, create beautiful patterns on their pottery and their rugs and their jewelry.
Oh, yes. And the Navajos, what sort of, do they live in teepees, or do they live in houses? Or?
Well, the Navajos live in what they call a hogan, and it's made out of timber and brush and mud, and it's usually a square sort of 15 feet in diameter, and usually they face east because their religion has much to do with the sun.
Mm-hmm. And how about the sheep herds and that sort of thing? You know, the herds of sheep that they keep, the Navajos. Are they tended by dogs, or are they tended by people?
No, it's usually the women. It seems the Indians over in the States had a wonderful way of life. The men usually don't do much work, and all the work is done by the women of the tribe. So among the Navajos, all the sheep are tended by the women. They go out, and young girls go out and watch the flocks all day.
And they watch it, say, even in the snow on the ground, all that sort of thing?
Oh, yes, they take care of them.
They take care of them all the time. And is it not a fact that they more or less camp out amongst their flocks?
Oh, yes, they'll go out with them for months on end and just camp with them. But they're very portable. In the summer they move from one place to another. They don't stick close to their hogans. They just sort of camp out. Very nomadic people.
Oh, yeah.
They were the original. Before the white man came, they were very warlike. The Hopis used to live in cliff dwelling, or they used to live up on top of mesas in very unprotected places, and then all of a sudden they moved into cliff dwellings, and the archaeologists couldn't figure out for a long time why they suddenly moved from these nice sunny mesa tops down into the cold, dank interiors of the cliff. So finally they decided that the Navajos must have come down around then and would make raids on the Hopis, which weren't the Hopis, but they're the ancestors of the Hopis. They'd make raid on the Hopis for grain and food and corn and their food and their livestock.
I believe that Kit Carson, at one stage in the history of America, rounded up all the Navajos.
Yes, he rounded them up in a canyon called Canyon de Chelly, and then took them all back to Window Rock and Gallup, and made them sign a treaty to be peaceful. And I don't think there's been any trouble with the Navajos since then, between the Navajos and the whites.
And the Apache Indian, the notorious Apache Indian, does he still live in Arizona?
The Apache lives in central western part of the state of Arizona, up in what is known as the White Mountains, and they're very peaceful now. They have big herds of cattle and are very prosperous.
They've lost all their warlike tendencies.
Well, I guess they have.
Well, thank you very much, Bill, for coming along and having this talk on the Indians of Arizona. We wish you bon voyage.
Well, thank you. Would you like me to close with a cowboy song?
Oh, yes, yes.
As I walked out in the streets of Laredo, as I walked out in Laredo one day, I spied a young cowboy all wrapped in white linen as cold as the clay.
Okay, so that was someone named Molly interviewing someone named Bill on side 1, and then for the first 20 seconds of side 2, and then the interviewer changed to some guy. I didn't catch his name, but he had an interesting pronunciation of the name Navajo. Okay, little bit of skipping there. The acetate was throwing the needle out of the groove for a repetition before it could fall back in again. It happens occasionally. There's not a lot you can do about it. It actually held up quite well. I might be able to clean that off and give it another go. We'll see if anybody thinks it's worth it. Please let me know in the comments if you liked this video, if you want to see more like that, because I have a bit of a collection of these. If you have any comments about what was said on the record, then by all means, let's hear them. Let me know in the comments, and thank you very much for watching and listening, and I'll see you tomorrow.